Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Hawken, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Welcome to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Altoff, the co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University. And I'm joined here today with one of our ChopLocal vendors, Rebecca from Dalton Farms. And based on some of the things that are, the information that is publicly available, and I'll say in particular, Rebecca's Facebook following, she has reached a level of success that I think a lot of our vendors and a lot of our farmers and butcher shops out there listening kind of aspire to. So just to put that in perspective, Rebecca, I think you have somewhere around 22,000 Facebook posts on your page.
I try not to look, but something like that.
We're going to talk a lot about that Facebook page, but why don't we start out, you just give us an overview of Dalton Farms, how you got started, and where you're at today.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me. Hopefully I can share something that'll be helpful to some of you guys. I married into the farm, so I did not grow up as part of the farm, but married the farmer.
Same here. I didn't grow up in agriculture either, so totally relate to you on that.
Yeah, kind of grew up, rural area, just a couple roads over, and what we call like a hobby farm now, but not where it was our livelihood growing up. So I married the farmer, and to be honest, the first probably 5 years of our relationship, we had many discussions about how I wasn't a farmer, and not because he didn't want me to be, but because I had a career of my own. So I wasn't really involved in the farm, to be honest. Once we started having kids, that kind of changed a little bit because it is truly a family farm. And as many people know, it takes the whole family and lots of sacrifices from everybody to make it work. And so that's when it kind of started transitioning to be a little more involved. And when I asked my husband, I'd happily be more involved, but what can I do? I don't drive combine, I don't drive tractors. Although that's changed, now once I got my foot in the door, he gladly takes my help for everything. So be careful what you ask for, I guess. But he was like, you know what? We could sell meat differently. We were raising cattle and raising dairy beef, actually, all for the market, but we were selling it all basically potload style to an auction. We would sell some halves and quarters, but a majority of it was going just to the auction. So that's where things started transitioning for me. And I started just kind of promoting it and started slowly. It didn't happen overnight. And we grew to now where not a single one of our head of cattle go to an auction. Everything that we raise, which has doubled since then too. So we've doubled production and been able to keep all of that local. And it's all direct to consumer now with our cattle, and that's just one aspect of the business. So that's like a very quick overview of how it happened, and it made it sound very easy. It wasn't, but that kind of gives a little bit of the background of it.
Yeah. How long ago was that you started selling your beef direct to consumer?
So Edward, my husband, was always selling some halves and quarters direct, but like I said, it was mainly like friends and family. If there was a half a month, that was kind of maybe where we were based with those sales. When my twins were born, they're going to turn 12 this year. So about 11 years ago, I'd say. Having twins is a little crazy. So as you can imagine, I was kind of looking maybe to step back a little bit from my career as a nurse and be home a little more. And that's when I really started a social media page and just started growing things. So it's been 11 years.
So your story makes it sound a lot easier than it really was. But think back to that time. It was pre-pandemic. What did you really do to get started? You started your Facebook page, but did you do farmers markets or anything like that?
No, so much has changed in those 11 years. I just started the social media page and just started sharing, what we did on the farm, which brings its challenges as well because I'm married to a farmer who doesn't always like to share those things. But I think as women in agriculture, we tend to be a little more of the sharer in that partnership. So I started just sharing things, and it wasn't always necessarily related to meat at all. And then every once in a while, just kind of throw in a meat post, or that did you know that we have quarters and halves of beef available? I mean, I had a huge network that I worked with being at the hospital, so that helped. I had a large group of people that were more in the, I don't want to say city, but not as rural as us, that started then learning and asking about ordering a quarter or a half of beef. So that's kind of where it started. It transitioned into a very different situation than just doing halves and quarters. So what I quickly found was that the people that I was working with at the hospital didn't necessarily want to invest in a half of beef. Whether they were nervous to do so, they didn't have the freezer space, or maybe they didn't have that bulk amount of money that they wanted to invest at that time. So I started making smaller bundles and packages. We broke down a whole beef and said, okay, how many of these $100 bundles can we make out of one beef to kind of simplify it for us, but also give a $100 price point for some of our customers. And that skyrocketed sales right there, because it was like that. I think it's the price point and plus freezer space too. And it's a good, way for people to try it as well without investing as much.
I started blogging about our farm, and again, like you, I didn't grow up on the farm, but I grew up in a rural area. But I think what makes it easy for people like you and I to share stuff online really authentically is that we're learning along the way, and these things are new and interesting to us. And so we have more of that consumer perspective of like some of these things that happen every single year or happen every month on the farm that the farm community is so used to. Like to us, it was new and interesting. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that bulls have a different shaped face. I just took a picture of my bull outside or something like that.
Yeah, actually, Ed and I were just speaking at a conference this past weekend, and one of the things that we were talking to our fellow farmers about was we were shocked. I think it was like a week ago. He just shared a picture of himself sitting at his spray certification class. And so many people commented on that they had no idea that farmers had to get certified to apply pesticides and sit through a class. They just thought we were able to buy them and do what we want with them, and that it didn't require any kind of certification. So it's just, like you said, it's those little things that we take for granted that we think people know that they don't.
And they're just interested in that farm life. And like you said, you post about what's happening on the farm. And I know at least now you post a lot about what's happening with your boys. And it's not buy all the time. It's really like showing the behind the scenes of what's going on the farm. And then every once in a while, there's that post that like, by the way, we have corned beef for St. Patrick's Day or whatever it is. So.
Yep, exactly. More of building that relationship, I found, and not just being a salesperson in somebody's face, because I don't like just seeing all that. It's connecting with our audience and having that relationship.
So I don't remember where I saw this. You might have taken a picture of your to-do list or something, but I think at the bottom of it, I saw you basically you post about 3 times a day right now. Is that right? And you kind of had at the bottom of your to-do list, I saw that you had jotted down what you were going to post AM, midday, and evening or something like that. Does that sound right?
Yes, I do. I try to 3 times a day, a morning, afternoon, and evening share. And just sometimes I'll schedule things. I'd like to say that I schedule things for the week ahead of time and I'm really organized, but that's not always true. I tend to be more wing it and what happens in the here and now. I would like to be able to schedule it and kind of only spend, an hour or 2 a week on all of that, but I also like to be able to share what's happening right now in my life and our life here. So I feel like that kind of hinders some of that if I schedule it out for the week, because Lord knows what Tuesday's going to bring.
And we talked about this in a webinar that you helped us out with about gift boxes, but you're not afraid to recycle content or reuse a post over and over too, right? The one example I think of is you've got one about like fresh versus frozen beef and what are the benefits of it being frozen. And I know that it seems like every few months I see that post again. Nobody ever says, "Hey, you just posted this." They comment on it, they're interested, they share it because they learn new information. Do you have other posts like that that you kind of share regularly?
That's the beauty of I found with like Facebook memories. Every day I just look and see what are my memories. And sometimes it's a funny story of what one of my kids did, but a lot of times it'll be one of those educational posts. And I look, I'm like, oh, I haven't shared that in 2 years from today. So I might just tweak it a little bit, maybe even change the picture, maybe not at all, maybe completely copy and paste it because I don't necessarily have anything crazy to share that day. And I'll just reuse it because I've learned that, not everybody sees everything you post. So depending on, what day and time and the logarithms, and a lot of times it's not the same people seeing it again, so they don't even know it's a recycled post. And it's then just reaching more people.
Yeah, I love that. We use that a lot more probably in our email marketing than on social. Sometimes I'll go when I'm scheduling social media stuff, I'll go back and look a year back and see what did I post last March. And then, of course, there's always those timely things like we were talking about St. Patrick's Day, or I think National Farm Dog Day is coming up or something like that. So,
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder. The other thing I'll do is I use my notes on my phone a ton. So if I come across something that I'm like, oh, that would be good content, but I don't know when or where I'm going to use it, I will just put it in my notes and as the heading, put post idea. So then when I'm struggling for something, I'll just search post idea and it pulls up all of the different things that I once thought was a good idea, and then I can find it and use it.
that's a really good idea too, because I feel like I'll have an idea while I'm driving or something silly like that. And while I'm brushing my teeth, and I don't do it right then, but you need to put it somewhere so that you don't forget later on. So, 11 years ago, when you started Facebook, it was a little bit of a different world in social media, I would say. I've started new social media channels more recently, like with Chop Locals and different things, some clients. And I feel like it's a little bit harder to gain traction now than it was back then, just because there's so many more users and there's more platforms. But if you were starting one from scratch right now, specifically probably Facebook, because I feel like that's your forte, what would you recommend to someone starting a Facebook page from scratch?
Consistency, I think, is a huge thing. Starting that page and then invite all your friends and family. Start with them because they're going to support you. They love you. They want you to do well. They're going to support you. Get some initial likes and followers on that page so that people then see it because it all is based off of, traction, right? So that I think would be the first thing to do. Then start posting consistently, just sharing something a couple times a day, maybe at least a few times a week, just to get stuff rolling. And then maybe, even boost or pay for an ad to get a little more would be probably the top three things that I would do, kind of in that order too. So just once you have some followers, then you want to boost it. You don't want to do anything before then because it just seems like nobody's following it. Why would you?
Right. Why would I want to? We talk about social proof and seeing that other people have bought from you, but it's also social proof in seeing that other people are following you. Those people must trust you. And so, therefore, if you boost a post and it reaches a new person, they can feel confident that they should trust you also because they see that crowd mentality a little bit.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So, how often do you boost posts?
Not very, to be honest. I have in the past, but not very often. Now, we have an event coming up here in about a month from now. We do host farmers markets right here on the farm during the summer months. So our first one is usually in March or April before Easter, wherever that falls. And it's April 6th this year. And so I did boost that event just to kind of reach some people that maybe, wouldn't necessarily see it. So there's instances where I'll throw a little money at something, but to be honest, I've been really trying to focus on not so much the amount of followers that we have, but the quality of those followers. So to me, I mean, if we had 50,000 followers, that'd be great. But you know what? I bet some of them would not even be close to us. They might not even be in North America. So would they equate to buying my meat? Probably not. So I think the quality of them is more important than the quantity. So I don't necessarily boost stuff all the time anymore because I haven't needed to, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Not only do you want those social media followers to actually be buyers of your meat, but also when they're kind of your ideal customer, they stay really engaged with you. Like I notice you get a ton of comments on your posts. And for people listening who don't know, comments on your post help more people see it. And so even sometimes if it's a controversial post or it's slightly controversial, I wouldn't say that I've ever seen you do anything like super controversial, but I know that sometimes you'll ask questions or you'll post something that's a little bit controversial and it'll get people talking. But that engagement is really huge for getting more people to see your posts.
And I do try to kind of keep that in mind when I do share stuff. People love to share their opinions. So that's another way that you can kind of get those comments going and then boost all of that so more people see it. People like to tell you how they feel about things. So by asking them, you got to be careful what you ask, but they are more than happy to share their opinion on things. So I try to think of, would I answer this person if they were posting this, or try to get something that's going to engage.
And I think that that's to some extent a learned skill too. Like you've been doing this for a long time, and so you know what is going to get people to engage and what might not. One question that I get asked a lot is I want to sell meat, but if I post pictures of my animals, I'm afraid people won't want to buy meat from me because they'll just associate that with their eating that animal that they just saw. That posting pictures of their animals may be a turn off to potential meat customers. Have you found that? Do you feel that way?
Of course, we've had some negative comments over the years. We occasionally will get a vegan on our page that just likes to comment to everybody that we're all wrong and how horrible people we are. But that just comes with the territory. And I try to remind myself that even negative comments are all they're doing is boosting that post. So that's sometimes easier said than done. But I really try to remind myself those are not my people. For every one of those, there's hundreds of other people who appreciate what we're doing and appreciate what we're sharing and showing them the quality of what our family is doing and the healthy meat that we're able to provide them. So I think that way outweighs the negative, even though I know it can be scary at times. But my husband would have never shared some of the things that I've shared. But those are also some of my most engaging posts because it's being raw, it's being real. Showing people that unfortunately, yes, we have some calves die sometimes. It's a fact of life. But then also sharing that that's when antibiotics are used on a farm. Antibiotics aren't horrible things if they're used appropriately. So sharing the truth of all that really gets people thinking like, well, yeah, if my kid was sick, if my dog was sick, I would treat them because it would be neglect if we didn't. So just kind of getting them thinking about it and sharing some of the things with the animals and how we do different things educates them and not intentionally, I guess. I like to do posts too that are educational, but people don't even realize they're learning something with them.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I remember seeing someone made a negative comment on one of your posts. I don't remember what the post was about. There was a negative comment, and some of your other followers like came in and defended you. It's not like you had to come there and defend yourself. You had comments coming from both directions, I guess, negative and positive.
That's why I'm saying the quality is way better than the quantity, in my opinion, because anymore I don't usually have to even say anything back. And the people that know us and will have our backs and they'll correct them for me, and then I don't even have to deal with it.
I think that I saw where somebody said, like, how can you eat that sweet face or something like that? And you said, one of our customers likes to know the name of their steer before it goes in the freezer. And she popped on there and said, like, yeah, we know that it was raised well and we're happy with the meat and it's doing its job. So,
Right, exactly.
When I get that question about should we be posting animals, I usually tell people the same thing that you said. If the person wants to be more disconnected from their food, and some people do, some people, I was telling this story this weekend. The first time my husband, we were fresh, newly married, he brought home a turkey from his dad's farm that had been dispatched that day, and it was like still warm and wanted me to cook it. And I was like, I need you to freeze this first. This is too real for me. I've never eaten meat that was that fresh. And so let's just freeze it and then I'll pretend it was from the grocery store and thaw it and cook it.
You feel better about it that way.
Yeah, and I'm over that now. But there are people like that, right? That they don't want to think about that connection from the living animal to the meat. That's fine. But like you said, they're not our people. They're probably not ever going to be our people. If they're a vegan, they're probably not ever going to be our people. And so we just have to remember that our target customers are the ones who care about how their meat was raised and that it's coming from somebody like a local family and that they can get all the information about how it was raised if they want to, and maybe that it's really super high quality meat, which I know sometimes you get pushed back on being dairy beef, but your dairy beef is highly marbled. People love it, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah. Sadly enough, it's usually people in agriculture that give us crap about it, which breaks my heart even a little more because it's, one of our own. But it is what it is. Our customers usually have our back on that too. Like, I don't care what kind of beef it is. It tastes great. I love it. So they chime in usually if anybody says anything about that too.
This is maybe a more practical question about dairy beef, but frame size. I have heard that dairy steers can finish really large and can be actually kind of problematic with processing. Have you guys run into that at all or not really?
They can because their bone structure obviously is larger than your typical beef breeds. That's where the argument sometimes comes in with those in ag. We've kind of found the sweet spot where it works for our steers. We know, when they're ready, they're not hanging out here. If they're ready, they're going. We're hauling in 5 to 8 a week to get processed. So we're constantly evaluating on a weekly basis, like who's ready to go. So they're not ever getting overdone, I guess you could say. With them, we found that ideal on the rail is like an 800-pound hanging weight. 8 to 850 is where they really are prime and marbled well. And so not huge, but also a little bigger than maybe some other breeds that people might raise.
Do you have a scale on the farm? How do you choose which ones are ready?
Eyeball.
That's legit. Some people are good at being able to tell, but I know, especially newer producers, I feel like struggle with that.
Yeah, we do have a scale, but to be honest, it's more for our boys 4-H animals than anything else. Our commercial or bigger production, they've never seen the scale. My husband's been doing this for 40 years, so he's pretty good at it, and I'm getting better. I'm not perfect at it, but definitely when you're out there looking at 50 head, you can, just by comparison, you can really look at like, oh, his brisket's more ready. He looks more filled and completed. So it's a learning curve. I never thought I'd be doing any of this, and here I am. So
Right? I have those moments all the time where I'm like, I never thought that I would be discussing rotational grazing with a producer on a podcast, or I never thought that I would know something like dairy beef frame size is bigger than beef breeds, but here we are.
I think the biggest thing that has still surprises me to this day is that I feel like I'm asked to be almost a chef or a recipe person for people all the time. Or how many pounds of prime rib do I need for my Christmas gathering is like something that, an example of things that I get asked all the time. And I never would have realized doing this as a career would have led to those types of questions. So I've really had to educate myself on some of those answers so that I can help, people determine how big of a ham to order for Easter and things like that.
And isn't it interesting how like that information you tend to like absorb it gradually. And an example, I remember a few years ago in a Facebook group, somebody was asking, how do you explain the differences between different types of roast to people? I didn't grow up with a quarter of beef in my freezer or beef and, we didn't raise our own beef. I just thought a beef roast was a beef roast. I didn't really know the difference. And now recently I was working on an email newsletter for a client And I can easily describe the difference between a rump roast and a chuck roast now and know what those are going to turn out like. Same thing when I pull them here. I know what it's going to look like when it comes out of the crock pot. But I don't really remember actually learning that. I feel like I just somehow absorbed that information over the past few years of working in the meat industry. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's repetition too. You know, people are always asking, well, how many steaks will I get with a half a beef? I can rattle off on our on our Holsteins what you're going to get on a half a beef if you get the standard cuts. I could have never done that a few years ago.
So every spring and fall, we host a webinar series, free educational events for farmers and butcher shops that are selling direct to consumer. Sydney, tell us a little bit about our spring 2025 webinar series that we have planned.
Yeah, so first of all, we are going to start with Stephen Ussery of Stewards Unlimited. He talks about the USDA Business Builder Grants. And before I go any further, I guess I should say you can always find these recordings on our YouTube. And by the time this is published, you know, a few of our 2025 webinars may have already been uploaded there. But then after Stephen's webinar in February, we will be talking about how to get people to buy from your online store. I feel like that's a huge conversation we have with our farms, but also tons of just, you know, farms and butcher shops we talk to across the country. Like, I have this online store, but everybody just keeps texting me or saying they want to meet in person or whatever it is. And so we're going to talk about lots of different strategies to get people to actually use your online store so that you're not having to field all those calls and messages and Facebook comments or whatever it may be. And then in March, we are actually going to be having Sierra, our marketing specialist. I feel like we've mentioned her. Sierra will be talking about social media strategies. And so I know we've kind of talked about social media in the past on webinars, but she's going to take a little bit different of an approach. She's really good at Reels, so I know we're going to have her talk about that, but just some other strategies that she sees success with. So I know that one will definitely be popular. And then our last webinar of the season will be about how to turn your farmers market customers into year-round customers. We feel like that's a good timing. I know a lot of our vendors are starting to think about farmers market season in that April timeframe. And so we're going to walk through some methods to kind of convert those customers into purchasing from you year round. So we're really excited about this lineup of webinars. We definitely think they're going to provide a lot of value. And we're just really excited to be able to connect with those farms and butcher shops through this series. So like I said earlier, you can always find our recordings on our YouTube channel, and you can get registered as well at ChopLocalUniversity.com.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Facebook and then just some questions about your dairy beef, but what other social media channels have you been using and what kind of success have you seen with those?
Facebook has definitely been our biggest, but I think it's because it's our longest. You know, that's what I started with. And plus, I think it's because of my generation and who I'm kind of speaking to. I hate to say this out loud, but the older generation uses Facebook more.
I'm right there with you.
That's where I'm at now in life, is, you know, on the old platform. But we also use Instagram just because it's easy. I can post both at the same time, so it's just easy. We don't have near the following on it, but I still use it because people do tell me, they come in, oh, I saw your Instagram post, and they come in that way and see things. We also do some TikTok videos just because it's a fun way to make videos and the kids like it and people love videos. So it's an easy way to just make videos and then I can reuse them for things. That's the main, but email marketing is a new thing that we've been doing because I wanted to reach people in another way, because what if one day, you know, there was that big scare where TikTok went down for 24 hours or whatever it was, and I don't want to ever be in that predicament if Facebook decides to close its doors, you know? I may have a huge following there, but if they're all gone, how do I contact my customers?
Yeah, so Sydney gets to do your email marketing for you. And I'm not going to lie, every time she sends out an email, she messages us and she's like, did you see how many orders just came in for Dalton's? Like,
she was funny. When we just did the corned beef, she was like, holy corned beef. And I said, well, I'm not like brag, but it is pretty good corned beef. And she goes, obviously.
Yeah, but we sent out the corned beef email and then orders came in just like this. And that's just so, we've talked about it before. It's immediate gratification. It's so exciting to see that happen. And I know you said it's great corned beef. It's also because you have built up an audience that trusts you really well. And we had no problem getting people to sign up for your email list and that type of thing because they're like, yeah, I do want more from Rebecca and Edward. I do want more information. It's a little bit different for people who are just starting out because you have to build that trust.
Well, and that's what a lot of people were telling us that, oh, I didn't even see that post. You know, people were coming in and asking for, use like prime ribs at Christmas as an example, or turkeys at Thanksgiving. And they're like, are you going to sell turkeys again this year? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I've shared that multiple times, you know, so that really got me into thinking like, you know what, they aren't seeing everything that we share. So at least, and they might, not everybody opens the email or sees that either because it can go to junk, but at least I feel like it's a direct line of communication with them. And if they're watching for it, because now they should know that it shows up in their inbox every Wednesday morning, you know, that is just another way that we can reach them and know that they're going to get it versus just scrolling and maybe not ever seeing it.
Yeah. And I think just like you said, Facebook hits one demographic and maybe Instagram and TikTok hit a different demographic. I think you're hitting different people with email too. There are some, my personal email is a wasteland. I would never see an email from you, but I see your Facebook posts all the time and comment on them. But I'm not on Instagram. But there are people who aren't on social media and they check every email religiously. And so they say, see your emails instead. So just helps you reach more of those target customers who know you and trust you.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think that the ROI there has definitely been worth it. So that's been great to see.
Yes, I'm very thankful. And I know I'm pretty new to it because we just started at the beginning of the year. But I'm very happy with my decision.
Good, good. Yeah, only 3 months into it. That's fantastic. Okay, so you do the direct sales. You don't do farmers markets, but you have what you call the meat barn on the farm. It's basically like a grain bin. When did you start the meat barn?
So the meat barn was actually in a barn to begin with. That's why it got its name, the meat barn. We were operating just out of some, freezers in part of my husband's barn that he then kicked me out of, is what I tell people, which is really the truth, because it proved to be something that wasn't going anywhere. And we were tearing down and setting up tables and everything for people to come in on every time we were open. And it wasn't temperature controlled in there, and it just was, he needed his barn space back for what he designed it for. So we wanted to build another area after a few years of doing that. And so right next to our grain setup, it was his idea to put up an actual grain bin. So it's a new build. It wasn't a functional grain bin ever, but we built a new 24-foot grain bin, so it's not huge, and framed it in, insulated it so it's heated and cooled, and have the coolers in there, and it's kind of designed where people walk in, they do their shopping, they go around, over to the cash register, they check out, and they're out. So just in that round, it works. We've been functioning out of the bin itself. I think we just had our 4th anniversary for the bin in January. And we were probably doing 3 to 4 years out of a barn before that. So everybody knew us as the meat barn, so we kept it the name, even though it's in a bin. We just kept the meat barn name. And it just really evolved. We started with, like I said, the halves and quarters of beef, and then started doing some smaller bundles. And then people just wanted individual cuts. If we had extra ground beef, then we were selling individual cuts. So then we started getting more freezers and coolers to accommodate that. When COVID hit, it definitely helped, expand the business. We were just lucky that we were already getting busy before that. So we had things scheduled at the processor, so it wasn't as much of an issue as some others had. But we did even like a drive-through style at that point. People would pull up. We'd have whiteboards wrote out with what we had and for what amount. We would bag it, box it for them, put it in their car, and they'd pull out. So, that there really was limited exposure to anybody. So we just kind of like adjusted with whatever challenge was presented to us at the time. And then when people were showing up for beef, they started asking for pork. They wanted, can I get a half or a hog this way too? What about chicken? We don't raise hogs or chickens, and nor did my husband say that we were going to start raising hogs or chickens. But we found farmers in our area that were already doing it. And especially during COVID, they were having trouble getting rid of their hogs. So we were able to get them processed and keep them local and get them into people's freezers for them. So we just started working with other local businesses. And then it really just snowballed from there. We had a family that does garlic. We have a family that has a kettle corn business, honey, maple syrup, sauces, seasonings. I mean, whatever you can think of, I almost have it in the meat barn now. So it's just like kind of a little grocery store, minus the produce part of it, because I'm only open a couple days a week. And that I have found is a challenge when you're only open a couple days a week to have things that aren't shelf stable.
Yeah, or freezer stable, right? So when you work with these other farmers, like, do you buy the hogs live and have them processed to your specs and you own the meat at that point?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Sometimes we get questions about, should I keep my label on it and I retain ownership, or does the other business buy it from me outright, or, and I think from your perspective, there's a little bit more risk in buying the live animals and getting them cut, but you've been doing it long enough that you know what the cut sheets should look like, what people are demanding, and that type of thing. You know what your volume of customers is too. And after having the beef business built up, you could probably pretty well anticipate how much pork you would need, or build that up slowly, especially when you're not raising it yourself.
I mean, it took us some time to find who we, wanted. We want to make sure quality, since we're not the ones actually raising the hogs, we wanted to make sure that we're offering our customers the best. So we're pretty particular. We won't just take any hogs and use them. But after years of doing it, you kind of know on a week-to-week basis how many we're going to need, or even month to month. We don't take hogs in every week. That's definitely our bulk of our business is still our beef. But that's good. That's what it's supposed to be, right? Because that's what it started.
Yeah. Well, in general, Americans eat so much more beef or they spend more money on beef than they do on other proteins. So that's what we found just across the board. ChopLocal sales pretty much follow the same percentages of what grocery store sales would be, and beef is obviously beloved by Americans, so doesn't surprise me, right? So the meat barn is only open to the public 2 afternoons a week, is that right?
Yes. So I do Wednesday afternoon 12 to 5 and Sundays 12 to 3 are the 2 days a week that we are open. Every once in a while, if I have to close a Sunday for some reason, then we might be open on a Saturday. But typically it's Wednesday and Sunday. Yep.
And when you add in your farmers market events, once a month, you said, in the summer?
We host them on our Sunday like we would normally be open. So the meat barn's open as well, so people can come in and shop there and then shop all the other vendors too. I really just tried to be consistent about when we're available and when we're here. I don't like to have a schedule that, there's a lot of variation to it, because I found that people expect us to be here on Sunday, at noon. And then people will show up just knowing that that's our schedule if we're for some reason closed. So we really try to not close and just be open those Wednesdays and Sundays consistently.
Have you always had limited hours like that?
Yes. So I started doing this because I wanted to be home and around more for my kids. As one of the main reasons that I started helping on the farm and being here. So I really didn't want to tie myself down to a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job, to be honest. And I talked with another small business owner when I was getting started, and I was like, I think I need to expand hours, because it can get pretty nutty here, especially on Sundays. Sunday is a great day. Do I love working every Sunday? No. But it's great for other people because they don't tend to have, after church, they don't have a lot of other, things that are scheduled. So it's been a really good day for us to be open, and Wednesdays too, but Sundays definitely are a little crazy. And I talked to another small business owner, and she was like, Rebecca, remember why you did this, right? You don't want to tie yourself down. You want to be able to go to, school field trips and do these things. And sure, I could probably hire somebody to do it, but the customers like to see us because we're the farmer. You know, we're the ones raising it. We're the ones sharing our story day to day. We're the face that they see. So seeing Edward and myself or the boys out working in the store, they know us and that's who they want to see. So I know that sounds narcissistic, but
No, because the other side of it is that you then get direct information from your customers too. You know the questions that they're asking, you know the cuts that they're looking for if they can't find them or you're running short. I know that's something even with Chop Local is sometimes I'm like, I need to take a back seat and take more of an administrative role and let somebody else do all the calls with the farmers and things like that. But if I don't do the calls with the farmers, I don't know the challenges that they're facing or the reason that they came to us for help, in the same way that I would if it was getting passed along to me by one of the other team members.
oh, I agree 100% because I know on a week to week basis how many T-bones I sold just because I'm there. And so I agree. And customers have so many questions like we were talking about, like how to cook certain things or what roast would be better for what recipe they're trying to make. And I don't know if I had somebody else out there, and I'm not saying I know all the answers, but I'll help them find it, and I don't know if I had just like a 16-year-old working out there, if they would be able to do that.
Sydney and Sierra on our team are fantastic, so I don't want to make it sound like I couldn't trust them to do things. There's a place for our employees. And they both have skill sets that I don't have, and so they do certain things and I do certain things. But I agree with you. It's not narcissism, or maybe not all of it. Like it's partly that just getting to know them and building that relationship that you guys are doing. That's why people are so loyal to you. They have direct access to the farmers. So I think about my teenage son. He did a great job working at the local pool this summer, taking the money and serving snacks. But yeah, he's not going to get real excited about figuring out how many servings of prime rib you need for Christmas dinner. So that's kind of the difference there. But I've also heard with limited hours like that, obviously it can create a sense of urgency. If I don't get there on Wednesday, I'm going to miss out till next week. And I think doing the online orders for pickup can really help get people to almost put it on their calendar. It's like an appointment that they have to go and pick up their order on Wednesday or Sunday. The other thing, so there's a farm nearby me who it's actually perennials, annuals, and produce. And I used to have a lean-to on their barn that was filled with home decor junk. Like I made a desk out of a piano. This is a real piano behind me, but I made a desk out of a piano, and that kind of thing. And we only did one weekend a month that my business was open. It was called the Home Shed. And one weekend a month, the Home Shed was open. And it would just be packed in there the whole time because people couldn't come out in between. The other thing that I think about having it packed is sometimes customers will feel like they're inconveniencing other customers, so they'll want to get in and out really fast. But there's also this feeling of like when there's a lot of people in there, there's just this buzzing of energy that people are like, wow, again, it's social proof. Everybody's here buying this, and what are they buying? And I better try that too.
Like I said, that other small business owner, when I was getting started, said people will show up when you're available. If you have the product that they want, when you are available, they will show up. And that just really resonated with me. And she was so right. And I'm so glad that I kind of stuck with that because I am able to do so much else. Now, granted, I'm working 7 days a week still, but it's able to be more on, my schedule and I'm not tied down. And I do agree with you. It creates urgency. Seeing the line out the door creates its own hype and buzz. And customers, I mean, we hear them talking while they're in the line. They're convincing other people to buy certain cuts because they tried it last week and oh my gosh, it's so good. Or this is the first time you've been here. Oh, you're going to love it. Rebecca and Edward, they're so great. It's its own community and it's really just awesome to see.
I still go down to the farm down the road to buy my perennials and stuff, and she doesn't do annuals anymore, which is another thing we could talk about, I'm sure, is kind of picking and choosing what parts of your business work the best for you. But she still has perennials, and every time I go down there, I see somebody that I know they're even in the neighboring school district. They're not even our school district, but I always see somebody I know. Like you said, there's this little community around it. And I think, a lot of people do on-farm pickup, but there aren't special hours. In some areas of the country, a lot of people do like farm stands that are self-serve, where you just go in and pick what you want and put your money in, but you kind of miss that atmosphere that way. So I like that with the limited hours like that.
Yeah, like you said, the relationships is where it's been at, and building those relationships and trust. And that's just another way that we connect with people, when they're in and we're checking them out, because it takes a few minutes. We're having a conversation with them about, what Simon did at school last week, or how our vacation was, or
Do your boys help out in the meat barn then when you're open too?
they do sometimes, not all the time, because to be honest, sometimes we're just so busy that it's harder with them out there. But they do help periodically. They love when we have the farm markets here, because they like to go spend money on everything that's here and visit with all the people that are here and run around. But they do help out there, and people love that. When they're running the cash register or carrying out the bags for somebody that might be a little too heavy to get to their car. They just love the family aspect of it and getting to see the people that we're sharing about all the time. So yeah, they do help out. They might complain, on a Friday if they're boxing meat and we're not going out doing stuff, whereas some of their friends might be doing some different things. But such is life, such is a farm life. So
That's one thing I can definitely relate to. My kids will work on the farm a little bit, but they don't love it. So sometimes I think we see on social media that it looks like the kids are just, along for the ride and they just love every minute of it. But that's not, I don't think that's probably as common as it's perceived. So
it depends on what it is, right? They're getting to run a tractor in the field. They're like, hands up. But if it's going to box halves and quarters of beef and help for a few hours and on Saturday morning, they're not always all about it. But it's all right. It's part of life.
yeah, and so by having your open hours and your farmers markets on Sunday, does that mean that a lot of your vendors, do they do farmers markets typically on Saturdays at other locations or?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, I'm new into this farm market world because it's not something we had attended a couple farm markets previously with our meat. The one I did attend was on the same day that my meat barn was open. So I had to close the meat barn to attend it, and it just wasn't penciling out. It didn't make sense for me to close my own shop to go there and not make as much as being home and making more money. So we only did that for one season. But in the area, it does seem like most of the farm markets are on Saturdays. So, or even like a Thursday afternoon or a Wednesday, evening, not on Sundays. And so some of my vendors can't make it because of that reason, because they might have responsibilities on Sundays and they can't, and they won't give those up, and that's fine. But for the majority, they don't have any conflicts because they don't have other things going on Sunday. And I think that's why we get the crowds to show up that do too, because there's things going on Sundays, but not necessarily as much as a Saturday.
Again, think back to if you were just starting this. If someone's like, I think I want to try maybe being open for limited hours, but I'm not sure exactly how to test this. Maybe for the summer, they say one Sunday a month I'm going to be open. Do you think that that would be an effective strategy, or do they need to say every Sunday for the summer and see how it goes, or what do you think?
I think you could do one, even just like with the farm markets, if you use that as an example. It's on a Sunday. It's not even every month. We're doing April. We're taking May off because we're going to be planting. And to be honest, I'm now helping in the fields. So nobody's going to be here. So we'll do one in June. We'll do one in July. But historically, August has been a poor sales month for the market, poor attendance. So we're not doing one in August. So we've just kind of tweaked things over time after we see what works and doesn't. We don't always do the same Sunday of the month that we do host it either. I look at the schedule and see what works for our family, and that's the Sunday we pick. So I think that you can be pretty flexible with it, and as long as you just put it out there and share, and people will show up. When you're available, people will show up. That's what I found. So I think you could do it as limited as you would want, really. We've even played around with hours too. Like we used to be open, I think we did 2 to 6 in the beginning when we did Wednesdays. But then I found from 5 to 6, really, the people that get off work at 5, it didn't really give them enough time to get here. So like 5 to 6, it was dead. So I'm like, why am I sitting out here for an hour when I need to be picking up kids from baseball and things like that, if nobody's showing up. So we tweaked it and made it a little earlier. And we're actually really busy from 12 to 2, which I would have never thought, but we are. So just kind of trial and error, seriously.
How far out of town are you guys, or how close to your customer base, I guess?
So we're in a rural area, but we are within, I would say, 20-25 minutes from some decent sized suburbs.
I was just trying to get a feel if people could run on their lunch break to come over and pick up their meat or whatever.
Sometimes people do. Sometimes people do. A majority of our customers, I would say, come within 20 to 20, 25 miles of us. Yes.
Well, I love watching from afar. I love getting to know your family via social media, which that's what I think is so great about, my middle son is Isaac. He's the troublemaker in our family, and you have an Isaac too. So I love getting to see all the behind the scenes and everything like that. And obviously, I love to see the success that you've had on Chop Local and with the meat barn and everything that you're doing. So,
Well, thank you. It's been very helpful having you guys to help me because you get it. It's nice to have, seriously, it's nice to have somebody that understands the business because I've worked with others and that wasn't always very understood what we were trying to accomplish. So it's been very helpful.
we feel like the same thing. We've been able to get really into the meat world, and there's not a lot of people that are experts on selling meat direct to consumer. So we feel like that's something that we can really we've gone into that niche and we can really try to help people with. So, and at the same time, all of us have cattle outside or farm animals and kids and husbands that farm and all of that thing too. So.
Right. Yep, absolutely. It helps.
Well, thank you for joining us, Rebecca. We really appreciate it, and we're excited to keep working with you.
Thank you for letting me chat and share my story.
Yeah, so everybody can check out Rebecca Dalton at Dalton Farms on Facebook, and I'm assuming the same on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, sorry.
It's Instagram, yeah. It's Dalton Farms LLC. So there is another Dalton Farms in New Jersey that does tulips. That's not us. We're the Dalton. Yeah, we get asked frequently when the tulip tour is. And I'm like, not me, but it sounds fun. I might have to go check it out one day.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.